Hello everyone and welcome to Care Treaba podcast or What's the Deal podcast, because the edition of today is actually a special edition which will be held in English because we have a special guest here with us. So we have in our podcast studio Gordana Berjan, which is the head of the division of the European Youth Foundation, as well as the coordinator of the Council of Europe Quality Label for Youth Centers program. But we would like to know who is actually Gordana as a person first.
Thank you, Nadia, for this warm welcoming. And it's really nice to be in Timișoara and in the youth house in FITT. Have had a really exciting day here visiting the youth center and to learn more about your work. Who am I? I am an international civil servant by profession. I work for the Council of Europe. It's the oldest European institution that works for human rights and democracy. And there I have worked for many years with youth participation, with the protection of children's rights. And in my work now, I'm responsible for visiting youth centers and quality label them like I have been doing here in FITT. Otherwise, I am actually also a person who used to be very active when I was in my teenagehood and in my early 20s. I was very active in terms of human rights. I grew up in Sweden, and there I was very active in the protection of youth minorities' rights. So I come from a youth organization myself. And I happened to participate in a Council of Europe activity training course on human rights when I was in my mid-20s. And by chance, I then ended up working with youth issues, and I ended up working for the Council of Europe.
Thank you for also touching this point, because it was also one of my questions to see how did you get actually to work in the youth field. So today our podcast will focus on youth centers, youth spaces, and also on youth participation. And we hope to give you relevant and important information which to inspire you, but also to help you maybe to become more active and to take initiative. Can you, Gordana, tell our young listeners what should they know about the Council of Europe? And also, what is the deal with the Council of Europe Quality Label for Youth Centers?
Big question, but I try to answer simple and short. Council of Europe is the oldest European institution which was created after the Second World War as a result or a response to say we don't want to have war anymore in Europe. This organization has existed now in almost 75 years, and we are protecting human rights in Europe. Since 50 years, Council of Europe decided in the late 60s, early 70s, in the last century actually, they realized that they have to have a dialogue with young people, because at the time there was student riots across Europe. They were not happy with the situation, and at some point the decision maker says, okay, we have to do something about this. We have to create a space for young people where we can have a constructive dialogue, because we cannot have riots across Europe in the member states. So at the time, it was 1972, they decided to create the European Youth Center in Strasbourg. This is where the headquarters are of the Council of Europe in France. And they created a European Youth Foundation, which I work for now. And the whole idea was to create this safe space for young people to discuss issues which are relevant for young people of that generation. And so it has been for the last 50 years that we invite young people who are active, who want to contribute to democratic societies and who wants to defend human rights. They come to our activities in these European youth centers. We have two, one in Budapest and one in Strasbourg. And based on that experience where we see that this is transformative, I myself is a participant once, long time ago, some 30 years ago, I participated and it changed my life. And we see the changes often most of the young people who participate. So we were thinking, how can we multiply this more? Because it's very expensive to have big European youth centers. So many were saying we need more youth centers. And then we said, why don't we use what we have already? We looked at our 2 European youth centers and said, let's look what is in the countries that are member states. And Romania is one of the member states of the Council of Europe for a long time now. And we were looking for other youth spaces that aspire to do the same thing as the Council of Europe. So we set up these quality criteria. We have 15 that we say a good youth space and a good youth center is this. And then we took the 2 youth centers, European youth centers, and as an example. And that is how we came about this quality label for youth centers. And we basically use these criteria to evaluate if a youth center is good and it does the right thing to work with young people. And FITT is one of those 14 unique youth centers across Europe that actually was evaluated, and we were very impressed by the work of FITT. And we said, yes, this is one of those youth centers we want to have in our family of youth centers that are labeled. So now for 8 years, FITT has had this label, and we come back every now and then after a couple of years to check on you, to see that you're doing good things, and then we prolong this label. So this is what we do in our work.
Great, yeah. As you said, so FITT has the quality label since 2015. And actually, today we have been hosting the end-of-term visit, so the re-evaluation of the work that we are doing based on this quality criteria. Is there any conclusion that you would like to share after the visit of today? Any highlights, I don't know, of the day that you would like to share?
Oh, there are many. There are so many impressions. It was a long day. We have been working for 10 hours, I think, just evaluating, checking, asking. And you have been a great sports and hosts, because you have been answering our questions very, very, let's say, patiently, because sometimes we can be quite annoying with our questions, but that's the way it is. I think what is super impressive and what makes FITT unique is the fact that it's completely youth-led. It's a youth organization. It's an NGO that has grown immensely over these 8 years when you have been having this special partnership with the Council of Europe. And the work that you are doing is very transformative. And it's amazing to see that young people can, first of all, set up such work, but then not only be happy with setting it up, but then developing it into something really, really big and important and significant. And we were very impressed today with your programs, your outreach with young people, the participation and the participatory approach, the way you work with partners and how you create these bonds and relationships where there's a win-win situation. So it's good for FITT, it's good for the young people, but it's also good for the partners. So there were many things we were very impressed with. But I think most of all, it shows if you empower young people the right way, the sky is the limit. There are no boundaries to what you can achieve. So this was really impressive.
That's a great message and statement. And I would also like to highlight that the work that we are doing is also inspired, and we feel the support of the network and of the program itself. This program of the quality label for youth centers. So we also rely on you as our partner. So yeah, I think this is also a great asset, I think, of the work that we are doing. You were saying that there were also some successful stories or inspirational stories of young people that have been in some of the Council of Europe activities. Do you have any cool story that we can share with the young people? Any inspirational maybe story?
Well, there are probably many, but I think what is cool is that often when we have these youth activities or a training activity with a purposeful educational process where we want to go deeper into a subject, and we work together for a week, for example, and we are in a youth center that has accommodation, food, the best facilities for training, and you live together, you work together, you socialize together, something happens there. And I think the biggest reward for us who are working with this is that when the young person comes after and says, this really changed my outlook of life and what I want to do, I now know much better what I want to focus on in life, and have discovered some values that are important to me. I think this is, first of all, the biggest reward and thank you can get when you are in this business, let's say. But I think what is the greatest thing is that once this young person has been in an activity of some kind, when you see them come back as experts in another activity, it can be another youth activity, or it can be in another field of the Council of Europe. Council of Europe is active in many areas. And they come back as experts, and we value their input, and we need them in order to develop new standards in a certain area. So we are not only investing in the young person to grow, but we actually invest in our own future, because they help us to give recommendations to member states how they can improve policies and practices. So I think on a more general, it's not an example per se, but many young people come back into and become experts to their national governments or to the Council of Europe, or even in the European Union context, they can operate as experts. So I think that's a great, let's say, receipt and proof that what we are doing in youth centers is very effective.
And if we speak about investing in the young people, which are the most important skills that the young people should develop for the future society, let's say, and how can the organization support the development of these skills?
I think we are in the business of value education. We have certain values that guide our work. So I think to understand those values and defend those values is a very important part of, if you want to make a difference in society, if you want to contribute, to stand behind certain values like human rights, democracy, solidarity, respect for each other, equality. All these things are part of our education that we do in a non-formal education, experiential learning setting, so to speak. I think we learn in those activities also to critically think about things, to see the perspective of others, all with the idea of mutual respect and dignity, because this is the essence for our coexistence. And if we want to have democratic and inclusive societies, we have to learn those skills. And this is all part of this value education that we do. Then, of course, if I go back to myself when I was young, I don't always take no for an answer. I ask and I'm curious. When people say, no, that's not possible, I think not now, but maybe later or in another way. So I think this curiosity and this drive that young people have, it's natural. But it is something, if you can keep it also when you get a little bit more mature and older, this is very important. It helps. But I think this critical thinking and being driven by certain important values and dream big. I think this, and allow yourself to dream big and not to stop because the first person said no. These are all important qualities in succeeding in youth work, in succeeding professionally in your job, succeeding in relations with other people, because you become a problem solver, you become a person that other people think, oh, this is a creative person, I can go, this person can help me. So it helps you, it's this kind of skills for life. So I would always promote that.
And how do you think youth organizations or youth centers in general can support the young people into developing these skills?
Well, I think youth centers, youth work can be done in many places, but the reason why youth centers are so extremely valuable to what we are doing, and that makes the big difference, is that the youth centers are set up with the purpose of supporting the young person who is there to empower the young person, to elevate and to bring this person to even having more skills and qualities than when they arrive. And we do it in an environment where it's safe to experiment. It's safe to make a mistake. It's safe to try out things and say things. You can exchange and you can correct and you can learn new things. And by doing so, you then inevitably develop the qualities of the individual. I think even when you put an adult in a youth center under the same conditions, that adult will develop. And for a young person, we see that every time we do activities, that this creating this safe space, having people who understands educational processes in a non-formal education setting, we always work with that the young person has the answers, and we work with the qualities of the young person. So there are no rights and wrongs. We just help them and guide them in the process. So I think that is the difference between having a meeting or an activity in a conference center and having it in a youth center. We are specialists in doing this for young people, and that's why it has such a big effect.
Cool, thank you. I think it's very inspirational for youth organizations in general, but not only. Because, as you said, non-formal education should not only happen in spaces that are dedicated for this necessarily, but non-formal education can also happen in informal spaces as long as this safe place and safe context is created. What does the European Youth Foundation do? And how can it support the young people or the youth organizations?
So the European Youth Foundation, it was set up at the same time as the European Youth Center in Strasbourg. And at the time, the idea was to stimulate international cooperation among young people, to give financial support to young people and youth organizations to work together and to meet across the borders. This was in the 70s when there was no cheap flights and the railway tracks were not so good and so on. It was another time. And the whole purpose was to promote peace. If you think about that, the Council of Europe was established after the Second World War. It was to promote peace among young people, respect and tolerance between young people who are living in different parts of Europe. And this is a mission which is very valid today, and even more today when we have war in Europe again. So we give funds, grants to either international activities, this is the main purpose of the foundation, and also to some local initiatives. And for example, now we do it especially for local initiatives which deals with the Ukraine crisis and the war. So any youth organization who is working with Ukrainian youth is welcome to apply, because we want to promote and support Ukrainian youth. So this is basically what the whole idea is. And what is unique with the European Youth Foundation is that all the projects that we give money to can only be to projects that are youth-led and but that are run and organized by youth organizations. So there are many foundations in general out there, but this is the only one who is only for young people. So that's why it's so special.
Okay, hope you noted. Okay. From your experience, how can young individuals or youth NGOs effectively advocate for their ideas, and how can they make a real change in the community?
Well, there are many ways and there are many different strategies, and it all depends on what the context is, where they live, and what is the problem and what do they want to achieve. I think a good way of trying to achieve something is always to join forces. Young people between themselves or between several organizations, youth organizations who want the same thing. So joining forces and trying to think cleverly, how can we influence this? This is a good way, because several are stronger than one individual. I think if you have a youth center nearby, like FITT is, or another youth center, I know you have many youth centers in Romania, I think it's very good, especially FITT I know well. I would come to FITT and say, hey, I have this idea or I have this problem. I would like to do something about it. Can you help me? And then there are people in the youth center who can give you ideas and tips and can help you with realizing that whatever you want to do. Then, of course, if you can also be part, youth organizations are usually very good with advocacy, and they give a lot of different trainings on that. So there are different courses and activities and workshops where you can learn about advocacy itself if this is something you want to be better at. But if I was a young person in Timișoara, I would knock on FITT's door and say, hey, I have this idea, can you help me? That would be my best tip.
Okay, cool. You said that you were also a youth activist. Which is the advice that you would give to your younger self?
Oh, it's so difficult because when I was very young, I remember older people telling me, oh, if I have your youth and my brain or my knowledge, I would conquer the world. It's a little bit like that, actually. When I was young, there were not so many opportunities, actually, and it was more complicated. And I came from a family where this was not so much encouraged, these kind of things. I think it's a difficult question. I think I would encourage myself. I was always a curious person, but I think I would have encouraged myself maybe to get a little bit more support and advice from a more experienced youth leader, or join a youth organization that could have helped me and guide me a little bit more. I was active at local level, but there are so many fantastic organizations that work locally and then nationally and internationally. And I think one of the best things you can do is join a youth organization that has these different layers, and you can start small and then you get to know if this is for you, and then this organization can give you great opportunities for international cooperation between young people. Because I must say that the reason why you interview me today is because I work for the Council of Europe, and the reason I am here is because I was a youth activist and I joined youth activities, and this brought me here. And I think if I would have known then that there was this faster way of learning about the world through youth organizations, where you learn teamwork, you learn leadership, you learn how to be solidaric, you learn democratic processes, I would have probably joined much, much earlier.
Okay, so here these peeps, this is the advice of the day. So find a youth organization that aligns with these values, and join it, because alone, as you said, we cannot do a lot, but together we can actually do great things. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners? Any project or event upcoming that the young people should know about, or the youth organizations?
Well, it depends where you are, but if you are in Timișoara, I would say come and check out FITT if you haven't, because they are doing great things. And if you are not member of a youth organization, maybe join one and participate in one of Council of Europe's activity. We do great activities in the 2 European youth centers, often with youth organizations. So I would recommend you that, because that's really great. You meet young people from all over Europe. Or if you have an organization already and you're happy with what you are doing, and it's about youth participation or democracy or some subject you find important, you can also apply to the European Youth Foundation, and you can do your project with our support.
So thank you, Gordana, for accepting the challenge and for being today with us after such a long day. And to our listeners, we hope that you enjoyed the podcast of today, and stay tuned for the next episode. Bye!
Bye!